Can the Texans get it popping with Emmanuel Pregnon in 2026? Is he the game changer left guard that Nick Caley needs to operate his offense?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, from H-Town to your town. Today's episode and every episode of the Locked On Texans podcast is for Texan fans all around. Super fun show lined up for you today as I continue with my draft coverage series for the additional daily coverage. Is Emmanuel Pregnon the guy? Is he going to be a perfect fit for the Houston Texans at left guard? That was a position of need throughout the entire year. I thought we saw like 5 bodies play left guard, right? They weren't able to do what they wanted to do because of that missing piece, of one of many, right? And so is he the guy? And let's also dive into his strengths and weaknesses. Coming out of college, he spent some time at Oregon. Obviously, this is where he just finished playing football. Also a couple of years at USC, started his career out at Wyoming. But shout out to my everydayers from the Himalayas for making the Locked On Texan podcast your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. You guys do me a favor as I continue with these daily draft coverages, additional coverages for the Locked On Texan podcast. Listen, you may like what I say about some of the prospects. You may like some of the prospects. You may not like some of the prospects. But here's the thing. You can let me and others know on the Locked On Texans Supercast Everydayer Club, right? All you got to go do is visit lockedontexans.supercast.com. The offseason does not exist for the Everydayer Club. Join the group chat talk right now for the Texans year-round. Get every episode of the show ad-free. So, again, head to lockedontexans.supercast.com to join the group chat. Tell me how you feel. If you like the player, if you don't like the player, and just who's the guy that you would rather have here in Houston. Now, with Emmanuel Pregnon, again, my criteria for guards, you got to be 6'4" and up. You got to be 330 and up. He is 6'5". He's 320. And he's a little slender 320, and I think that shows a lot in his frame, which we'll dive into. But listen, in terms of experience, 50 career starts across USC, Oregon, and Wyoming. Honors back-to-back all Big 12 recognition. PFF gives the Houston Texans a 22% chance of drafting him in April. Only 1 sack allowed over the last 3 seasons, and he cleaned up on quarterback pressures as well. Extremely durable, right? Scheme versatile interior offensive lineman. We'll dive a little bit more into that. I think he's a plug-and-play type of player for any offense in the NFL, not just for Houston, but for many offensive teams in the NFL. And for some scouts, he's being compared to Jonah Jackson and Kevin Zitler. So, you look at how good Jonah Jackson is, look how good Kevin Zitler is. Those are 2 good comparisons. And I think when I look at the projection, when I look at Pregnon, it feels like a classic trade back target. Right? A player Houston could grab early in the second round after acquiring more picks, similar to the draft range and value tier of Jayden Higgins, right? And I think that's important to point out with some of these prospects coming out. Once you get to, I think, 25, right? Between 25 and 40, typically the value that those players could bring is about the same. Now, you'll get some guys in that bunch that are just, they overplay their expectation and their value that it was expected of them to play. You'll get some guys in that bunch that underplay it as well. I think typically you look at between 25 and 40, some of those guys and what they're going to bring to an NFL franchise will typically be around the same. For the Houston Texans, that's their MO, right? They did it in 2024. They ended up with Kamari Lassiter, right? A lot of fans wanted Brian Thomas Jr., but I think 2 years later, we're okay with Kamari Lassiter. We're more than okay with Kamari Lassiter. They did it last year. They were able to go get Jayden Higgins, pick up additional late-round picks, and that helped Houston. I can see that happening again this year with Houston selected at 28. Hey, listen, if they feel like he's going to be available at 35 and the team wants to come calling up to go draft a player that is not Emmanuel Pregnon, or if they feel like Pregnon and maybe another interior offensive lineman will be available between 35, 36, or 37, wherever they would trade back to, then that makes sense for Houston on a team that could very well just build depth in places that they absolutely needed with late round picks. And so I think that's something we have to keep in mind. I know a lot of Texas fans are tired of always having to trade back, but that's the reality of it. Listen, when we come back, we got to dive into how he fits, right? How he fits, his background, and what I believe he could be able to do for Nick Caley's offense that absolutely needed a guy like him last year, but he had to get better from his USC days going into his last year at Oregon. So we got more Locked On Texans talk on the other way, breaking down Emmanuel Pregnon.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
Also, Texas fans, workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to still feel is open, sitting, and you need a body to fill it, but you need the right body to fill it. When the pressure is on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. You're getting the right candidate. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I'll be talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed sponsored data worldwide. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, more results, less time. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Just go to Indeed sponsored jobs/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Again, that is Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, let's get back into what really matters. Why you came here. We're going to go deeper into Emmanuel Pregnon as a draft candidate for the Houston Texans. Now, when I look at his scheme background, and I'm going to be real with y'all, I get so tired of always having to talk about scheme and philosophies, because sometimes I think we overlook if the player can just flat out play. We overlook that sometimes. If this player gets into the right scheme, and I think within the last 10 to 15 years, especially with the offensive explosion, and we see more of these modern day, quote unquote, offensive coordinator geniuses and offensive gurus, the scheme has mattered a lot more than the players. Then you get to the playoffs and it breaks down. If the player is physically unable to do what they need to do as a player, that scheme don't matter. However, I've mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. Nick Caley and Houston's offense had to adapt because they lacked the players needed to execute their offensive philosophy effectively. One of the significant issues in 2025 was the left guard position. Pregnon, at the very least, has a background that demonstrates his experience in various blocking styles and schemes. So I just want to throw that out there. I say all that to say what Houston needs, he can provide. You look at his USC days, despite that spread label, USC offense was not purely finesse. The scheme featured effective inside, outside zone concepts along with guard tackle counters, guard tackle pulls, regularly stressing defenses with a physical ground attack. And that Oregon operated in a fast-paced hybrid system, blending zone and gap principles. Pregnon was widely considered Oregon's best offensive lineman throughout the season. Now, I go back and look at some 2024 tape while he was at USC, and I thought the perfect game to look at was Michigan. And some of the things that I saw during that game, run game base, bottom on, from hip down, was inconsistent. At times, he fired out of his stance with his head down, arms high, allowing defenders to just swim around him or just chop through the frame to convert to beat that power, right? Just chop the arms down, get him out the way, and was able to make plays against Pregnon. That was an area that I thought he needed to be better at, looking at some of the 2024 tape. He ended up on the ground more than I like to see. He had tendencies to lean in his stance and at the snap. And again, the leaning in the run game, you're going to get defenders that's just going to swim around you or just going to pull you down and make a play in the backfield. You're going to get linebackers or a defender altogether who's just going to meet you with contact and knock you off your base. And that happened a little bit frequently. Occasionally, late get into landmarks when pulling or when picking up stunts and twists. Like some of the things that hurt him in his 2024 tape with USC, he got better at in 2025. I will say that. The awareness from the 2024 often flashed before the body caught up. So the recognition was there, but it was slow to the point. You can see the processing, but the physical execution lagged behind at times. However, the 2025 growth, whatever happened at USC, where he got faster and he got stronger and his recognition became a lot more sharp, there was a clear refinement from 24 to 25. The biggest difference, his feet became quicker and more controlled, and his play looked more natural and less mechanical. He just put it all together, and the Indiana tape stood out the most to me. I thought that was one of his best performances of the year. Look at pass protection fluidity. He excelled handling stunts and twists because he processes the game so well. His true one-on-one pass protection ability is higher than it might initially appear. That's great for a guard, especially looking at the competition that he's going to be playing at the NFL level. Yeah, he can handle and process stunts and twists, but sometimes you got guys like Chris Jones that just want to run through you. You got a guy in the division in Jeffrey Simmons that just wants to run through you. Can you handle that? Now, obviously, that's a hard task to ask a young offensive lineman, right? We saw how that turned out with Kenyon Green. However, I think his additional time in college, also played 5 seasons, started at Wyoming, went to USC, multiple systems. I think that helped him a lot. He's also a trusted pulling guard during his days at USC and Oregon, but significantly more consistent at Oregon with better contact and finishing through. Much stronger anchor in 2025 compared to 2024. Much stronger anchor versus the Bull Rush compared to the previous year. Looks like at Oregon, he thought less and played faster, right? And so you look at the natural ability to just, grow in your position and knowing what you need to do, not having to think about what you need to do. That's a big difference. Better hip positioning and body control when climbing shows the ability to turn defenders and create clean rushing lanes. And also early in his career, he handled pure power rushers better than finesse rushers. However, in 2025, the tape shows real improvement there. So it may not be a true weakness in his game entering the league. But again, one thing that I loved about his Oregon tape, he climbed up to the second level. Excellent. And not just on plays where it was a free lane to rush up to, right? A linebacker, you block down, you combo block and go up. That's a little bit easier. I'm talking about those one-on-one situations where it's mano-a-mano and a D tackle in front of him at the snap of the ball. He under them pads. He moving up to the second level, and you got a running back running off his tail. So Pregnon cleaned up on many of the mistakes and issues showed in the USC tape in 2025. He played with noticeably better body control, which elevated his effectiveness as a run blocker and stabilized his pass protection. Bottom line, I think he's ascending. I think he is a scheme versatile guard with clear year-over-year development, a strong day two candidate. He may get in that 29, 30, 31 range, depending on what other guys before the Houston Texans do and how other players are viewed around that time. Right? I don't think this is a receiver class that you want to trade up for. A lot of these guys, if they fall to you and you like them in the first round, then you go get them, unless there's a team picking high in the second round that may want to move up for a receiver that they may really like. I.e., I don't know how how Buffalo may view this draft and receiver. Gotta look at some of the other positions, maybe like Tennessee. How does Tennessee view this draft class? Do they want to trade up and go get a receiver if that receiver is available at 28? Would Houston pull the trigger on that trade if they come calling, right? But I like Pregnon. Again, I think he could be available where Houston is already picking and where the Houston Texans could possibly pick. Fun conversation to have, because obviously, would the Houston Texans re-sign Ed Ingram? His asking price is a lot. I think from there, the question is, if you do bring him back, who's the young guy you want to pair with Ariante Ursher on the other side, right? And also, remember this. Do you want to have two young guys on that side and have Andrews in the middle? That's young, and young. The vet will be on the right side if they elect to keep Titus Howard at tackle. If not, it can be youth, vet, and whoever they decide to go with at right tackle. And a lot of you guys like some of the right tackles coming out in this draft, or maybe they can look to keep Trent Brown on a cheaper deal. But you also got to consider his health. Blake Fisher is also a name to keep in the mix. Who knows? We'll see. But thank you for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, daily coverage, draft prospects for Houston. This will continue Monday through Friday, unless some things change, and I'll double up on the weekend. Until next time, ladies and gents, Texas fans across the nation, peace.